welcome to another episode of For the Love of Marketing. This is actually the last episode in season 2, so we're busy planning season 3 at the moment, but I think we're going to finish this series on a high because I'm really happy and excited actually to welcome Robert Cooper. Robert is founder and president of PlusROI and What Works Marketing as well, two fantastic organizations. Absolute genius when it comes to precision focused. Let's go with Google Ads, paid advertising, Robert. I mean, the whole thing. And I think today we're going to go through some questions around how to be really smart around targeting your ads so as they're truly effective, right? So you don't, you cut out the nonsense, cut out the rubbish, and get really down to brass tacks and focus on what works. How's that sound?
Sounds great.
Good. Well, pleasure to have you. Whereabouts in the world are you?
Victoria, British Columbia.
Nice.
In Canada.
Lovely. In Canada, for those that don't know where British Columbia is, yeah. Lovely part of the world. How is it over there weather-wise at the moment? The weather's crazy all over the world right now. Is it okay over there?
Yeah, we've been lucky. The province has been suffering from some extreme heat and drought, but here on Vancouver Island, it's been quite moderate and rather nice.
Nice. Lovely. Okay, well, I've never made it out that way. I've got a client who was over very close to you just last week, but I've never made it there myself. But anyway, no one wants to listen to me talking about my travels. So let's get cracking on some Google Ads content. So one of the first things to go into, which I think is really important for people to understand when they're setting up ads, is a focus on what sort of keywords are likely to work, right? What's likely to convert, and what is just a keyword that may deliver some traffic, but nothing right at the bottom of the funnel in terms of conversion. So what do you find is the right way to source keywords, I suppose, that you can target for effective conversion through Google Ads or any other sort of paid advertising?
Well, the biggest thing that we focus on really is the idea of intent and the concept of intent. And what I mean by that is just we see just an absolute ton. I mean, I've looked at thousands of ad accounts over the years, and a lot of companies for their advertising, and even a lot of agencies, do a really good job of targeting keywords by relevance. So in that case, well, let's use our own industry of digital marketing. And so a digital marketing agency might target on the term digital marketing. Unfortunately, probably 80% of the traffic for that term is going to be interested in the topic and not actually interested in purchasing services. So in terms of intent, what you really want is some additional language that only somebody with some level of interest in buying your product or service would include. So possibly digital marketing agency, digital marketing company. A fantastic one is if somebody includes a location. So if you're marketing in a city or country and somebody includes that city or country, that means that it matters to them where the person or provider is located, not just, again, just a higher level of interest that they are actually planning on eventually purchasing services. Because if they're just Googling the topic, they don't really care where the results come from. If they want to purchase a product or services, then they absolutely care.
Yeah, and I mean, I think for me that's been a rule right since the beginning of Google Ads. I mean, I've been running Google Ads myself for 20 years. When did it launch now? 2002, if I remember rightly. So since it launched, and for me that location based piece has been a key element of intent right from day one. Yeah, as you say, looking for a digital agency. London, digital agency Vancouver, but also sort of near me as well. I think is always a nice one. Anyone who's sort of location focused is obviously looking for a solution to a problem near them, rather than just generally trending. I think if you take the word agency out of it and you're just looking for digital marketing in the UK, then you might be doing a bit of research. You might generally be looking at the topic again. But if you've got that sort of agency or even award-winning agencies or anything like that, again, you're looking for perhaps the top players. I guess there can be a lot of grey areas. It's really obvious if you're looking for who are the best digital marketing agencies or who are the best digital agencies in London. As you say, really obviously too broad if you're just looking for digital marketing. Are there any sort of areas that you consider sort of grey areas in the middle which you need to test and work out for yourself because they might be intent-based or they might be too generic?
Definitely worth testing just about anything. I mean, having again, done it so many times, there are some best practices that we just follow and don't bother to test. But if you're doing it for your own company or a new client, definitely worth testing some of the more general stuff. I know in one of our companies, we do a fair bit of wellness and healthcare advertising. And surprisingly, some of the fairly broad terms do convert in that situation. So again, it's just a situation where personally how we'd approach it, and probably based on the fact that we mostly work with entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial companies who are spending their own money and quite concerned about the spend, we'll start with quite narrow ad groups on the highest intent topics, and then do small experiments with the other more broad ones, and then add to those as you go. And I mean, it's also worth noting that companies that get really good at conversion can actually afford to go more broad. So if you start with the higher intent keywords, learn all about converting clickers and searchers into clients and customers, then once your conversion rate goes higher on the landing page conversion, you can actually, again, as I mentioned, go broader and still be profitable. But starting with the broad topics is not a great way to go.
No, I agree. I mean, I've had this debate with a couple of people over the last couple of years. Some have told me they prefer to go broad and rely on Google's algorithms to make the decisions and trust the methodology, I suppose, to bring it down to something profitable. I think that's extremely risky. If you've got money to burn, then absolutely go for it, right? But it is going to burn through a lot of money. I'm much more focused on being, my approach, I think probably very similar to yours, Robert, being precision targeting, work out what works and then build out from there. As you say, bigger budgets, higher conversion, give you an opportunity to perhaps take a few more risks. The broader terms for me do also sometimes build the top of the funnel, build the awareness a little bit more. But generally, if someone's searching, they've got a need, and it can be an expensive way to build awareness if you're going too broad. Is my view on
it. No, and that brings up a really interesting point. Is that right now Google is recommending that you go broad. They actually recommend within the interface to improve your results by adding broad match keywords. Which the interesting thing about it, and I think in general, I like Google; they're a responsible company. We've worked with them forever, but that only works for very large companies. So if you're spending a ton on a national advertising campaign, then absolutely you'll go broad in Google. Google will identify the pockets of opportunity and then narrow down to it. And their theory, which is probably true, that a year in, your ROI at that point probably exceeds what it would have been had you gone narrow if you're spending that much money. The real challenge that, especially with our What Works agency, where we deal with much smaller advertisers, is that essentially that data for the algorithm resets more or less every 30 days. And these smaller advertisers never get enough data for the Google algorithm to actually take hold. So in essence, those recommendations for smaller advertisers are just ridiculously inappropriate because it will just never work.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I think there's a danger in following just what Google is recommending to you. They will always recommend various strategies that they want you to push. But and as you say, great organization, of course, Google. But you do need to be cautious about what's being recommended and what you implement. Broad can work extremely well, but not necessarily large organization, but certainly large advertising budget is required to really make that effective. Definitely. Great. That's really good. I mean, look, there's loads of different campaign types out there that you can set up within Google Ads. There's lots of different ways of approaching it. How do you prefer to set up campaigns?
Well, I mean, in terms of all the different types, we're very much a search first agency again, and that we're working a lot of smaller companies, and then even the larger companies we work with are typically very entrepreneurial. So, and I mean, it's in our name, the PlusROI is that we are focused on getting the most sales or the most leads in the shortest amount of time to be able to show measurable ROI. So we Yeah, generally always go to search and exhaust all the best efforts in search before branching beyond that. But yeah, essentially a conversion based bidding strategy. There are a few of them. Um, of course, you can do return on ad spend bidding strategies, although you do need to build up some data, of course, before you get to those. So we usually just start with make sure that the conversions are set up in a manner that it will make sense, and then do a bidding strategy to maximize the number of conversions. And then, sort of the most important thing that we do going from there is when a client starts brand new, of course, they have no data. So we use conversions. For instance, we might use a 5+ page view conversion, which isn't actually a purchase, but serves as a proxy for interest while the data builds. And then as soon as the client has enough purchases, then we'll actually turn off those multi-page conversion goals and then rely strictly on a purchase conversion goal and have the algorithm jump over to that.
That's great. I mean, that's really good. I was going to ask you a little bit about conversions because there's a whole ton of different ways to approach it. I think that's a really interesting one. 5+ pages. Are you finding that's generally indicative of a serious shopper, a high intent shopper? The 5+. Do you use that generally as a rule across most accounts, and you find that works well?
Yeah, I mean we've used that or time on site, or and again it's not the ultimate conversion, but for somebody that's starting from zero, it is a nice proxy for interest, and it gets folks to being able to use the purchase or sign up or inquiry conversions much sooner and much more effectively. And really the challenge um, is that Google is now recommending to do conversion based bidding typically almost right out of the gate. But I think that's just they've come to realize that most advertisers don't have the knowledge or sophistication to do kind of more advanced things. So they basically make it as practical as it can be within the realm of what a typical advertiser might be able to set up. But yeah, without hesitation, taking that sort of staged approach and starting with a more modest, lower barrier conversion can absolutely accelerate the early results.
Yeah, indicative signs of direction of the user. I think, yeah, that's very good. In terms of landing pages, I mean, whilst we're talking about conversion, yeah, there's a lot of debate around what makes a good, always has been a lot, what makes a good landing page. I certainly have my views on how I like to structure landing pages. I mean, do you have a preference, anything that you can give to our listeners that says, look, if you're setting up a landing page for a Google Ads campaign, these are the sort of core rules to follow?
Well, I mean, there's a few basics that are just not really open for debate, such as, and remembering as well that when you're bringing paid search traffic, you're typically bringing somebody and exposing them to your product or service for the very first time they've seen it.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't have trust, they don't know everything about you. So, I mean, a couple of rules of thumb is one, that the benefit of your offering is immediately apparent and scannable, that you have a benefit driven headline that makes it clear sort of what your offering is and why they want it. Typically a few bullets to bring out some of your key points. And then as well, what we call credibility indicators, like something on the page to indicate that you are a legitimate, responsible vendor, as well as just it being really nicely branded. Because if somebody comes and it doesn't look quite right, and they don't know you, they're just going to carry on.
Yeah.
And then it even affects perception of pricing and how much people expect to pay for your product or service, how professional the page looks when you land.
Mm-hmm.
Then, of course, typically having some sort of call to action visible on the page that they land on without having to scroll. Yeah, those would be probably the big ones
I
off the
think
top of my
you've
head.
hit the majority of them right on the head there. Yeah, yeah. There's a couple of other things. What one thing I would add, and one thing I would ask you. So, I always prefer landing pages that have minimal navigation on them as well, in terms of having lots of blogs down the side or something like that. You might do within your site generally, to trying to get have deeper engagement in your site. I would generally try and avoid anything that's distracting someone from a funnel journey, right? If you're trying to push someone down, as you say, the call to action, make sure your focus is that call to action and you're not hitting them with lots of other pop-ups and whizzy bits about other exciting things on your site, because they will get distracted and disappear off out of the funnel. So I think that's the one thing I would add. Question though, one of the ideal scenarios, is that someone searches for an intent keyword. They see an ad that's got that keyword in there and they think, great, this is spot on what I'm looking for. And then they come through to a landing page that again is perfectly matched to what they've searched for. Now, in that scenario, you need a lot of landing pages. Are you more in favor of having one really compelling landing pages? Well, sorry, one really compelling landing page, or are you more in favor of having 10 or 15 to fit various campaigns?
Definitely the 10 or 15 or whatever number makes sense. Yeah. We don't have a ton of clients that would have more than 10, but we basically sort of allow the volume of traffic to dictate. So in a perfect world, each of your ad groups would probably have its own landing page, and that's not actually as daunting as it seems. We're doing most of our sites and landing page platforms in WordPress, and it's literally a click of a button to duplicate a page and change the headline, possibly change a couple of bullets, and then that literally it's a 5-minute effort to improve your conversion rates. And so again, how far you take that really depends on the volume of traffic you're sending on those different keywords and how valuable they are. But yeah, if you set it up well, it can be, take literally minutes to make a variation of a page.
Yeah, that's great. I think it's it's certainly my preference. I think the volume piece is key. There's no point having 10 pages with 2 visits a month, right? It's not going to help you learn anything at all. So that's absolutely vital. But I always talk about the example of someone searching for red socks. Should I ideally see an ad about red socks and land on a landing page about red socks? They shouldn't land on a landing page about clothes and then have to try and find the socks and then the red socks, right? This should be, we're talking obviously about a shopping example there, but which obviously that can be dealt with a number of different ways. But I think it's really important to land people on a journey that is frictionless all the way through, from start to finish. So yeah, good. Okay. What about your view on display? I mean, you've talked a lot about search. Your display is a hot topic, and again, it's another one that's been a hot topic since the 90s, right? That's since before search as we know it now. And yeah, there's a lot to be said for raising your awareness and having really effective display campaigns. And obviously, there's so many options in the display world now as well. But then, as a converter, should you even bother, or should you just push your money into search? Where's your view on whether you should do display, and what's your and how to do it effectively, I suppose.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think display, generally we don't do it a lot for clients until they're a little more further along their advertising journey, with the exception of business to business. And the biggest mistake I see is folks not spending time on identifying an audience size that they can approach with enough sort of frequency and repetition to actually make the display ads valuable and to build some brand equity through the display ads. And what I mean with that, like Google's a great example, and there's some other challenges with Google Display that we probably won't get into right today. But in that example, typically their display audiences are huge.
Yeah.
So you can pick just about any topic, and it's like, oh, there's 6 million people in my target. It's like, oh, this is great. There's all these people. But if you're spending a few hundred or even a few $1,000s, and going out to an audience of 6 million people, you're just going to have random impressions showing up from time to time. You're not going to build any repetition, get any brand value. And there was a program I did very early in my career talking about it, and the fellow who's teaching gave the example of it's better to take 10 people 100% of the sort of branding journey versus 100 people 10% of the way to a successful branding journey. And those would both cost the same, except one has a whole ton of value, the other has pretty much zero value. And so in my own example, we do advertising for our own agency for webinars and events and that sort of thing. So for instance, we'll go to LinkedIn, and I love identifying an audience of in LinkedIn about 5,000 to 10,000 professionals, because I know that we can effectively get the message out to each of those. And in the example of a webinar or an ebook sign up, typically a frequency of 2 to 3 views per person, and more or less all the people that are going to convert at that point. So whereas again, you could easily end up with a target of 100,000 people, and they'll never get that. People will never get that second impression, because the platform's really looking just to get the cheapest impression, not necessarily the most frequency or a set amount of frequency. But funny anecdote is that the biggest influence that's helped me with display advertising is the science behind radio advertising, which has been around for 100 plus years. Is kind of television still has some value, but radio, I still feel is very relevant for a lot of companies if they've got budgets to do it properly. And we basically base our display advertising schedules on more or less what a radio schedule would look like.
Yeah. That's smart. I mean, I've done a bit of radio myself over the years, and there's a strong correlation between radio advertising triggering searches and obviously triggering a recollection of display ads as well. There's a strong correlation there. I think they work extremely well together as channels, and still incredibly relevant, perhaps even more so than years ago. So I think I think radio is a strong channel outside of digital still. Even DM, to be honest with you, even DM sits very nicely, but we're going to get distracted and start talking about other things here. So let's not do that. Great. Look, I mean, for me, Robert, there's some brilliant tips in there. I think, some solid advice, which I couldn't agree with more. I think absolutely spot on with the thoughts around how to target effectively, how to build those conversions in the early stages, what intent really means, and the ongoing relevance of display and even radio advertising we've managed to cram in there as well. So some really useful stuff, Robert. Thank you so much for your time. That has absolutely flown by for me, but hugely valuable. So I think if anyone's looking, especially if you're over in the Vancouver area, but I imagine lots of other locations as well, right, Robert, for a really smart agency who's going to be able to help them deliver good ROI across your ads, I definitely recommend going and speaking to Robert and the team over at PlusROI. Who do you want to promote, PlusROI or What Works, Robert?
Oh, probably for our international audience, PlusROI would be way more appropriate. But always happy just to meet new folks and have a brainstorming discussion, regardless of business.
Great stuff. Awesome. Well, look, thanks very much. And thanks everyone for listening. Hopefully some useful stuff in there for you. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next episode. And in fact, the next season of For the Love of Marketing. Thanks, guys.